empty the chamber on them. And how do you do that? First 6 seconds, point A to point B, everything you got. Everything you got. Turn that shit up. Let's go. Welcome to the Scoop World Order Phil Steele edition. We have the godfather of preview magazines, the best in the business, the only guy that picked me to start as a freshman in 2004. Out of all the preview magazines, there was one guy that did his homework and got it right. So he's always been my guy. I appreciate him. He's an Ohio native. I love the guy to death. But real quick before we get to him, again, thank you guys for our growth on YouTube. We've been exploding. Some of the biggest videos we've ever done have been in the last month, which is normally a pretty quiet month. So I'm just telling you, we appreciate you guys. Give this thing a like. If you have any questions or comments, throw them in here. Any questions for Phil or any reactions to some of his great answers? I can't wait to hear them. The Buckeye Scoop members they have a list of questions. I'm going to try to get to the best ones, and just really excited about this. So bring on my man, Phil Steele. Phil, how are you today?
You know, I am doing great, Kirk. How about yourself today, my friend?
Every day I get to talk to you, man. It's like the best day of the year because people on our site, they say that the day your magazine comes out is like Christmas Day. It's like the official kickoff to college football. When I was a graduate assistant for Urban Meyer in 2012, the only magazine that sat on our staff room table was Phil Steele. So if we're getting ready to play Central Florida or Cal Berkeley or whoever, and we're trying to get a little bit of, you obviously going to watch the film, but just get a little sophomore, junior, transfer, started 60 games in his career, started 20 games, transfer from whatever. Like that is it's like the almanac. It's the best. I love it. I'm so happy that you're here. The most important thing is people want to know, where can they get the magazine right now?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Due to a paper shortage, we actually had to do the magazine in 2 runs this year. We printed half of it back at the end of June, and that's now available at all Barnes and Noble. So if you have a Barnes and Noble in the area, and I did a signing there in Columbus
Yep.
with a Barnes and Noble, so I know they're in Columbus right now. But all Barnes and Nobles have the magazine right now. Now, if you want to wait till the end of the month, they'll be available at other places. But if you want to save some gas money, don't drive around looking for it. Just go to Barnes and Nobles right now, or you can order it directly from our site, which is philsteele.com. And I got to tell you, Kirk, hearing the story about the magazine and what you were using at the with Urban Meyer, it makes that 7 months of that we spend producing this magazine every year seem all worthwhile because we put a lot of labor into this magazine every year.
Yeah, and your grind is incredible. The amount of detail and how thorough you are is incredible. And also, I'd like to mention that you have a digital edition as well, correct?
Yeah, and the digital version,
Yeah.
which you can get at philsteele.com, we're actually going to
Yeah.
update all the way through the start of the season. So, as an
Oh,
example, UAB lost their head coach. We've changed that already on the digital version. We have the new head coach up there, and it's all set and ready to go. So, and we'll circle players that are lost for the season during the month of August.
yeah. I honestly love the digital version because I put it on my iPad and I can just kind of sort through it while I'm watching a game because you have depth charts and you have it's just great. I love reading through it and kind of getting notes because plus it's no paper. It's just like I love the digital version. Big fan of it. So appreciate that. I wanted to plug that real quick just because that's the issue that I get. Just because I love always having it on me. It's like you can't always walk around with the magazine in your hand, but if you have it on your iPad, it's everywhere you go. So it's perfect. Anytime you're in a waiting room, it's the greatest thing in the world. Um, Real quick, so we're going to get right into the Buckeyes. Obviously, Ohio State is projected to do great things this year, led by Heisman frontrunner C.J. Stroud. We have Trey Henderson. We have Jackson Smith-Njigba, arguably the top set of triplets in the entire college football landscape. Give me your thoughts on the Buckeyes. Maybe what is their ceiling? What is their floor? Talk a little bit about your projections because you got them projected to do pretty well this year.
Yeah, absolutely. The ceiling is national championship, naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Best offense in the country. You hit it right on the head, Kirk. You've got the 3 Heisman candidates, C.J. Stroud, Travion Henderson, and then Smith-Njigba at the receiver spot. They are absolutely loaded in. The offensive line is going to be stronger than last year as well. I feel it's the best offense in the country. Your biggest question mark probably comes on the defensive side, but I think Jim Knowles steps into a pretty good situation. Ohio State's defense underperformed last year. He's got a ton of talent. The linebacking core is my biggest question mark on the team, but I think they'll come together. better than expected. Love the defensive line and the secondary. And I think the special teams is strong as well at number 17. Now, for the floor, this is interesting. The over under right now in Vegas is 10.5 on Ohio State. And I look at the schedule. I have them favored in all 12 games. The closest game I have them favored in is Penn State, where I have them about a touchdown favorite. I got them a 2 touchdown favorite over Michigan. So does Vegas. I have them a 2 touchdown favorite over Notre Dame. So does Vegas. I love over 10.5. I don't see a way that they lose 2 regular season games. I would say the floor is actually 1 regular season loss. And let me preface that with the fact that last year was an unusual year for college football. We saw Clemson not get to the ACC title game. We saw Ohio State not get to the Big Ten title game. Oklahoma didn't make it to the Big 12 title game, and even Alabama lost to Texas A&M, struggled to get past LSU, should have lost to Auburn last year, and that would have kept them out of the playoff mix as well. Well, the reason for that was when I talked to 120 to 131 head coaches this year, and last year when I was talking to the coaches, 90 to 95% of them told me the same story over and over. Phil, this is the deepest we've ever been. Everybody was back from COVID, and they said we could run 3 teams in the spring. We've never been able to do that before. Well, which teams weren't able to do that? Well, how about Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Alabama, teams that lost a lot to the NFL. This year, we're back on the level playing field again. Everybody's lost players, unlike last year when everybody had 17 plus returning starters. And I think we're going to see a return for the powerhouses. So I may be cutting off one of your questions in the future, but my top 4 teams at the end of the year: Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia. I think we see the powerhouses come back. And I really like Ohio State over 10.5 wins.
Yeah, I love that. I think that roster management, other than NIL, is probably the biggest change now because of the portal and the fact that you don't have to sit out for a year and play scout team, and you can be immediately eligible. And to me, I've contended on the offensive line, especially, that depth is almost a myth, because if a kid is good enough and he's the 6th or 7th man, there's a good chance he's going to transfer out. We had Ryan Jacoby transfer out to Pitt, played, started the bowl game. We had Max Ray, who started a game for us 2 years ago in the COVID year when we had some guys down with COVID. He transferred out to Colorado, got injured. But those are our 2 backup tackles that were just right out the door, and they were starting at their respective schools they went to. I'm not sure if Max, because he took a medical red shirt because he got hurt. But I just think depth is a myth now. I mean, and how much harder is it? Maybe not harder, but more difficult is it to track players in your magazine year over year with the addition of the portal?
Yeah, the portal made it very interesting. And it's one of the reasons we go to the press June 8th. They closed the transfer portal this year, May 1st. And, a player like Jordan Addison had to enter the portal by May 1st to be eligible to go somewhere. But then you still didn't know where he was going to go. So we were able to capture all the moves that happened in the month of May and even the start of June. I gave each of the coaches we have cell phones, and I say, contact me if you got somebody coming in or leaving towards the end. And it was pretty active in that respect. And, an interesting thing with the portal, Kirk, and I'll throw this by you. One thing I found, and talking to each of the coaches about the players, is like on the offensive line, which you just touched on, was how the FCS players are able to come in and play right away on the
Yep.
offensive line. And what I
Mhm.
would do is, as I got through, like when I got to coach 20, I'm like, wow, a lot of FCS players. Then I started asking questions. The consensus I got at the end was that the FCS players can come in and do well on the offensive line because of the amount of repetitions that they get at the FCS level. And we've seen
Mhm.
them come in and be equally as effective as the FBS. What do you think about that philosophy?
I mean, you see guys that are from small schools like Trevor Penning, Ali Marpet, some of these guys that go on to the NFL, and they're playing 15 weeks, so they get 5 extra weeks of practice, and they have a lot of teams in the playoffs. I'm talking D3 ball, in the championship series. But I think that between that and the fact that this is really any position, but really heavily with the offensive line, because offensive lines are really tough evals because kids can gain 50 pounds in here and have a total transformation. For me, it's like Florida International had a left tackle who played as a freshman last year. And after the season, hits the portal, and Ohio State offers them, LSU offers them, Miami. So it's kind of like these kids that they go to like a lesser school. It's almost like you wonder if there'd ever be a type of strategy to that where maybe I got to go to a school where I can play right away and up my stock and then hit the portal. Then he goes to LSU. Brian Kelly lands him after he committed to FIE, starts as a freshman All American, then out the door to the school that a school that he wanted to go to, but he didn't get looked at. I mean, that's the most fascinating thing about the portals. I feel like it really is going to destroy the smaller programs because no kid grows up dreaming to go to a MAC school, unless their dad played there or whatever. It's like every kid wants to go to Ohio State, Bama, Clemson, Georgia, and if you ball out as a freshman as a young player, you can do that now, and it's wild. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I tell you, talking to the coaches for the group of five, that's their biggest concern. I'm going to make somebody a star, and then somebody's going to poach him, and he's going to be gone, as opposed to having him there for 3 years. So, the one thing the group of five coaches, a little bit, maybe some of their philosophy is why not sign some transfers, because you can only transfer once, right? And be
Mm-hmm.
eligible immediately. So then the thought process is maybe sign a transfer so they can't get away once we sign them. So but they are definitely concerned. The group of five coaches, that is one of their main concerns. Or late in the recruiting process, they've got somebody locked up, and then somebody steps in, offers the kid $50,000, and boom, he's gone there. So and they really can't compete with that.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's the Wild West is here, and I mean it's great for message boards, it's great for magazines because people are always studying because people are going to go to the smaller conferences in your magazine and say, well, who was the freshman star that maybe we could poach, or it's like teams
Yeah.
that they might not have paid as much attention to now they're going to be like, oh, they got a freshman left tackle that made all conference last year, maybe we can give him a call. And again, I don't like it. I think it's terrible for the kids. I think there's a lot of kids that make bad decisions and they don't land
Yep.
anywhere when the music stops. But I just it's crazy. So I wanted to we'll talk a little bit more Ohio State, but in terms of your process, because you kind of went through this with me last year, where you go through how, say for Ohio State, and obviously you don't have to name names, but you talk to multiple people within the program to get kind of a thought of what to expect, maybe who could be the next, how to fill out your depth chart. Because something I'll never forget is in '04, you had that I was like the scout team MVP when you projected me to be the starting tackle, and I was like, I didn't even know there was a scout team MVP, but like someone must have said something to you, and that's why I was like, this guy is like, no, I mean, this guy really does his homework, because like I really, I got a bunch of scout team player of the week awards, and and Jim Haycock said I did a really good job, and I was always working hard, and the older guys like Will Smith respected me because I always would go hard in practice, and like, but you had that, and nobody else had that. It's like, so someone in the building said something to you at some point. I'm sure over a call, but talk a little bit about your process of gathering information for like an Ohio State, for instance.
Yeah, and it for all the 131 teams, I think I talked to 120 of the 131 head coaches this year, going over
Mm-hmm.
their teams. Talk to every head coach, like especially the group of five. I'm going to talk to every head coach in the MAC. I'm going to talk to every head coach in the Sun Belt, and we give the same amount of coverage in the magazine to the group of five, two full pages that we do to Ohio State and Alabama. But yes, there's always you have to have context at every single site. And the one thing I do is I've got 12 TVs in front of me. I'm watching 12 games all season long. We go through in our first write through process. We read every article that is written about the team the past year, and then write the team. Then the second write through process is pre spring, where we add in the freshmen and add in the transfers that have come in. And then the third one is after I've talked to the coaching staff. So it's a 7 month process going through this, and I need every single detail. I don't want one thing to slip through my fingers. Going back to your scout team comment, once I got a hold of that comment, I'm like, I think this guy can start that year, and it turned out to be pretty valuable.
Yeah, I'm telling you, that's why you're a difference maker in your field, is just because of people know how hard you work. They know that nothing really gets past you, and you unearth a lot of gems, nuggets, diamonds, whatever you want to call them, that nobody else has. So when you read it, like you're actually reading, it's not just regurgitated like press conference. This is like deep dive it's like talking to a coach. It's like what would a coach say about his team, like and I think it's fascinating. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time. I got some questions from the board. This is a great one from AT, one of my favorite posters. In your opinion, who's the best college football player ever?
That's that is such a man. Whew, there are so many
Yeah.
great college football players, and college football has been going on for such a long time. I mean, I enjoyed Earl Campbell at Texas. I thought was outstanding. Archie Griffin, the only guy with two Heisman trophies, and Archie Griffin was not a great pro, but he was a great college football player. But man, there's just been so many. It'd be tough to come up with one.
Well, I mean, for me, it's Orlando Pace because I play tackle there, and there's just a different level with Orlando. That's my boy. So
There you
I
go.
go with
There you
my
go.
boy. You have 3 and out, number one overall pick, NFL and college Hall of Famer, checks every box for me. So there's my thread. But I appreciate that response. A great one from Joe Drame. Which seasons has stood out as the most fun to cover in your history?
Well, I'm going to the ones that had the most chaos. You could last year,
Yep.
for example, and it was just chaotic. Clemson didn't win the ACC. Ohio State didn't get. I mean, these teams didn't even get to the title game. So, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and then how about that one where LSU won the title despite having what, a couple of ties? Or I mean, it was just
That was
a
my
mess
senior
at
my
the end.
senior year, '07. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty wild in 2007. So those would probably be the most interesting ones to cover. But to me, every college football season is exciting. I've been a college football fan since I was 4 years old, so
Yeah.
it's big for me.
Yeah. Best college team ever, including the year. A lot of people go 0-1
Yeah,
Miami, but that LSU team was good. Who's your thought?
yeah. I'm going to go recent history. I'm going to go with LSU just for the amount of ranked teams they beat, how dominant they were.
Hmm.
And I know that they're not supposed to count blowouts or anything like that, but there were some
No.
pretty doggone good Oklahoma teams and Nebraska teams, and
Hmm.
we've seen some really good teams. But I'm going to go with LSU just for the fact of how they blew teams out on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and
And
I think that. Go ahead.
plus that year on ESPN, when I was working for ESPN, I wrote an article on the Heisman, and I picked Joe Burrow as my dark horse Heisman Trophy candidate
Whew.
at 200 to 1, and he delivered. So I love Joe
Oh
Burrow
man.
and LSU for that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, watching him and Jamar Chase together in Cincinnati is a blast for Ohio football fans. Yeah, I mean, it's just when you see the talent and how well it's sold in the NFL, it really adds a lot of power to that argument. Just because, I mean, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, great offensive line, Joe Burrow's, a franchise quarterback in every sense of the word. That's a great pick. Because again, the thing about the Miami '01 team is that the quarterback wasn't a star. I mean, he was a college player, but he wasn't an NFL guy. A lot of talent, deep team, but that LSU team would have given them a run for their money with Chase and Jefferson on the outside. Um, a lot of questions about Michigan's offensive line versus Ohio State's defensive line. After we gave up 296 yards, do you think that we can slow them down a little bit better this year? What do you think of Michigan's offensive line? Obviously, they got an outstanding transfer from Virginia, a Remington finalist last year. What do you think of that matchup in the trenches?
Much better matchup than last year. Last year, I'm on the Joe Moore Award Committee.
Mhm.
And we had Michigan as the number one offensive line in the country, and they lived up to that all the way up to the Georgia game in the season final. But I'll tell you, being on the offensive line, and you're probably like this as well, Kirk, these guys that are on the committee, they've never seen an offensive line that they completely love. They're always like, yeah, I love that unit, but they're right guard. You should have seen him on this play and should have seen him on that play. They're always picking on something. And last year was one of those years where they found weaknesses on every offensive line that was out there. But I still rank Michigan's offensive line number one in the country coming in, but I rank Ohio State's defensive line number five. So I do not see Michigan opening up the holes for a couple hundred yards rushing on Ohio State. And I think the key is going to be not just the line play, but the linebackers factor in so much into the rush. And I thought that Ohio State last year had just average linebacker play and should be much better this year. So with improved linebacker play, I see that as an even matchup.
Yeah, and shout out to Duke Manyweather, Jeff Schwartz, Aaron Taylor. They all
Oof.
run that. That's one of the greatest awards because it's the biggest award I think in the entire world because it's huge. My guy Harry Heastand got that at Notre Dame a few years ago, but it's a really cool presentation. Hopefully we'll get one in the Woody Hayes one of these days.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm honored, Kirk. I'm honored because I'm the only non-offensive lineman or offensive line coach that is on that award. So I can't thank them enough, and that they thought highly of me to put me on the award committee.
I love Duke. I mean, Duke's my guy, so I'm just real excited. I honestly did not know you're on the, but I mean, you're as knowledgeable as anybody. So it's good. This is a great one. Your thoughts on CJ Stroud's supporting cast versus Bryce Young's supporting cast this season?
Clearly, C.J. Stroud's got the better supporting cast. I mean, the running backs
Hmm.
are close, but the receiving core clearly goes to Ohio State. The offensive lines are very close. The receiving core is the difference, and all you have to do is look back at last year. Jamison Williams was having trouble getting into Ohio State's starting lineup, and he was the star for Alabama. Now, I'm not saying Alabama's receiving core is weak. No, let's scratch that. But Ohio State's got one of the best receiving cores in the country. So, and that's the reason that in the magazine I picked C.J. Stroud to win the Heisman Trophy this year is the better supporting cast, and I feel Ohio State leads the country in total offense this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that, with Marvin Harrison Jr. as well and Emeka Egbuka, I just don't know how you check all three of those guys. The line I think is going to be strong. I think Justin Frye is a great hire. This is one that I think is your best and worst predictions of all time. I mean, the Joe Burrow
Well,
one's pretty good. I put that one up there.
yeah, I would put the Joe Burrow one up there. I had go back to when what year was Ohio State won the national title. I had them as my number one surprise team, and they were in the top 10 at the start of the year. As the
Yeah.
start of my surprise team article. What year was that? The years run together for me sometimes. Was that
In
2000?
in 02 or 14?
Yeah, 02.
Okay.
2002, I had Ohio State as my number one surprise team to win the national title, and they delivered for me. So that would be right at the top. Worst pick would probably be last year. Last year, I had Washington as my number one surprise team, and I've had a great record of surprise teams. In fact, I chronologed that in the magazine this year. And last year, Washington was ridiculous. I mean, they were just a feeble offense. I know they had wide receiver injuries at the start of the year, but I was very disappointed in my pick of Washington. Also, last year, I actually missed for the first time ever a non-top 10 team that made the playoff, and that's Michigan. I didn't have them making the playoffs. So those two things coupled together made my surprise team list the worst ever. And I'll say this. I think one of the reasons for that, it was the fact that some teams that played 4 games the previous year, like Washington, and some teams that played 12, and it must have messed my metrics up a little bit. I was very unhappy with my surprise team picks last year.
Yeah. Well, I imagine when you're trying to gauge that, you look at. I love your metric of returning starters on the offensive line and returning quarterback. Is that one of the things that, and obviously schedule? If they got a softer schedule, that always helps. If they had a juggernaut of a schedule the year before, and you kind of look at those two. But what are the metrics you look for to determine who you're going to pick as a surprise team?
Well, I have 9 sets of power ratings. I plug them into the computer, and I let my if like 8 of the 9 sets of power ratings are saying 11-1, 12-0, and I think they actually have a chance of being their first qualification. You have to be a non-top 10 team. So I
Mm-hmm.
automatically throw out any team I think will be in the top 10, and then the ones that come up with the best record. So that's the main qualification. We've had tremendous run on those. The sports teams have been doing extremely well. A couple years ago, we had Utah as the number one surprise team, and had they won the Pac-12 title game, they would have made it, and yet they weren't even in the top 20 at the start of the year. So great track record of success. Notre Dame has been a surprise team. Not when they're not in the top 10, they've made the playoff those years, but just last year was a tough one for it.
Yeah, I think last year was a weird year because there were so many teams that, like when you're talking in spring ball about how they could go three huddles deep because they had 6-year guys, like guys that
Right.
they got a COVID year. So you have this bumper crop of kids that were supposed to be either in the NFL or selling cars or whatever. Like they're not supposed to be there anymore, and they stick around for the year. And wow, we got all these extra guys that are legally there because of COVID. So that was a pretty fascinating thing. This was an interesting one. This one came up a lot. You have Bryce Young as your first team All American at quarterback, but you have CJ winning the Heisman. So,
How do you not? How do you not put returning Heisman Trophy candidate as first team All American?
I,
It's much like if the number one team in the country came back with everybody from last year, you'd have to put
yep,
them number one in your preseason poll, and with no argument. So that would
yep.
be the reason for that. But I think the better supporting cast is Stroud, and I think that Stroud has a bigger year this year, and that's at a more important offense. So I'm just not going to take the returning or the reigning Heisman Trophy candidate and not put him first team All American.
I mean, I'd be right there with you because it just makes sense. Final thing. Okay, so you spoke with people inside the building at the Woody Hayes Ohio State's football training building. Give me one name on offense, one name on defense that maybe isn't a household name yet, but could be maybe a guy that'll, show up like Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. kind of had his coming out party, but give me a name on each side of the ball that you're really excited to see how they do this year.
I would say on the defensive side, I'd like to see how JT does up front. I mean, I
Hmm.
think he's going to have a massive year. I don't think he had massive stats last year, but it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being the master of the team and
Hmm.
really emerging on the defensive line. Um, you know, offensively, we already know most of the names that are on there. So,
Hmm.
if we take a look at well, I mean, Paris Johnson is no brainer there, left tackle, but you already
Hmm.
know who he is. So I don't
Yeah.
know who's going to really emerge on the offense, but I think JT has a big year this year on the defensive line.
I love that. Well, cognizant of your time, I could do this all day, but you got a million other people who want to talk to you. Phil Still, we love you. Your preview magazine is the start of college football season for the people on BuckeyeScoop.com. I appreciate you so much for taking time with me. Again, I always tell people he's the only guy that picked me to start as a freshman. That's my guy forever. So, again, Barnes and Noble, go pick it up. The digital one gets updated up until the first kickoff. I mean, I didn't know that. That makes it even better for me because I buy the digital every year. Um, but I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
Hey, Kirk, thanks for having me on. We should do this again before the football season starts when I've got a little bit more time. I
Oh,
get more time in the month of August, so let's do this again, my friend.
I love it. Thank you so much, Phil. We're gonna wrap this. We have that was unbelievable. The best insider, the hardest working man in college football, Phil Steele. He again, he's a friend of Buckeye Scoop. He's a great person. We love him to death. His magazine is the start of college football for all of us, and appreciate it. So our boards are on fire. The best message board there is, BuckeyeScoop.com. If you guys are considering joining, it's 2 days are about to start up. So let's get a crack in. I'll see you on the message boards. Thank you, Buckeye Scoop family. Thank you, Buckeye Nation. Go Bucks.